Why hello there, Brent here with Bring Your Own Tools. On today's episode, we are completely transforming this very small bathroom into something beautiful again. If you want to know how to do it, keep on watching. Let's get started. This is the bathroom that has not been touched in a very, very long time. Oh boy, look at that beautiful tile. Oh yeah, gorgeous. Before I start any demolition project, I always highly suggest putting down some floor protection as well as some visqueen around adjacent rooms, because it is going to get quite dusty in here, as well as the fact that I don't want to be marring up any of these beautiful floors. I remove all of the plumbing from the sink as well as the toilet, and remove the toilet as well as any other miscellaneous items such as this beautiful medicine cabinet from the 1960s. Whoever installed this vanity with this backsplash actually did a great job, because these tiles were on there good and this sink just did not want to come out, which is why I always suggest having a reciprocating saw on hand for any demolition project, because it always comes in handy. As well as having a second helping hand just to make sure we're able to remove all of this stuff and put it in my truck for later disposal. I don't want glass shards around as well, so try and keep the glass shower door in one piece if you can. As for removing tile around this shower entryway as well as inside the shower, my favorite tool is a framing hammer. Yep, a framing hammer does an amazing job at removing tile extremely quickly, because all you have to do is figure out where your stud placement is and then go to Pound Town and remove large sections of tile if you're able to. When doing demolition work, you want to make sure you have the proper safety gear, whether that's the boots you're wearing, the clothes, the gloves, but the main things that I want you to think about is making sure you have the proper respirator and eye protection, because you don't want to be sucking any of this dust in, as well as protecting your eyes because there are flying tiles about. Now, don't ask me why, but for some reason in past decades, they thought head height was not necessary and you want to feel like you're closed in a small cavernous cave, because this ceiling is extremely low, and for some odd reason, they built a large framework soffit above the shower for no reason whatsoever. This is literally just a random framed out area that maybe they were low on tile, so they didn't want to tile all the way up to the ceiling height, but it was easy to remove, luckily, because all it was some framing and some drywall. We are also removing the header for the shower opening, and I did know ahead of time that this is not a structural wall, so keep that in mind on your project. As we move on to the shower pan, I did have to take a sledgehammer to the ledge, but when we got to the tile, that's when it got a little tricky, because I did have to bring in my rotary hammer to make quick and easy work of this mortar bed with the tile, but you can easily rent one of these for half a day and make quick work of this shower pan. However, the most unfortunate aspect about this project is the fact that we ran into the one thing you really don't want to run into when demoing out a shower, and that's rot. Yep, not a ton of it, but we definitely ran into it, and we had to remove some of the wood that was completely falling apart, as you can see. We have some rot. Luckily, it's dried out since no one's been using the shower for years, but we for sure need to get rid of all of this loose debris in any other areas that is fully rotted out, including some of these boards, and get this drain out of here, because that drain is not helping anyone these days. This is, of course, an unfortunate circumstance because no one wants to see rot. However, don't panic, especially with the fact that this wall is not a structural wall. So after remove all the soft, rotten wood, I go back and apply Abatron wood epoxy. Now, this product I've used and featured in other past videos, and you apply a liquid epoxy first, and then you combine a 2-part clay type product, make sure that's fully mixed together, and then apply it like Play-Doh. It hardens extremely hard, and you can apply it in exterior and interior purposes.
I install a new bottom plate, and as I wait for the wood epoxy to dry, I then proceed to remove the existing drain because, as I said earlier, this drain is disgusting and we need to install a brand new drain shortly. But before we get to that point, I do want to start removing this old laminate flooring. Now, this old laminate flooring is not something that you want to cut into because it could potentially have asbestos, and therefore I score it and then use a large pry bar to remove large chunks of it. Personally, I find this way extremely easy to remove this old laminate, including the MDF that's attached to it. Not the best stuff to use for a subfloor. Now that our wood epoxy is hardened, I grab a few 2x4s and start cutting some extra studs. Now this specific location does have some electrical running through it, and therefore I do notch out a small section where the electrical is so I can bypass that section. And again, luckily for us, this is not a load-bearing wall, so we don't have to worry about the fact that we're cutting a section out of our stud and reducing the strength of it. And at this time, if you are going to be installing a glass shower door, I would determine the exact width that you need with tile for it to be framed out appropriately. There's a number of layers that go on to this framing, so make sure you give yourself a little bit of room. At this point, I start installing any of the piping that's going to be needed for the floor drain. Now, if you have access on your project to the underside of this room, then I would wait to do that after the pan is in. However, as you can see, we don't have access below unless I want to open up the ceiling in the basement. We want to try and avoid that at all costs. Oh, and if you're wondering what adhesive we're using for this application, we are using the OD all-purpose cement because this can be applied to PVC as well as ABS. I installed some construction adhesive on both sides of the joist, which I did beef up as you can see, and then reinstall a few boards for floorboards. Now these are large scale 2x6 floorboards because we have such a weird long span, and therefore that's going to give us plenty of support over this entire area. Before I close up the floorboards, I do install a galvanized hanger strap to secure the plumbing in place so it stays in position and it won't move on us once we start installing our shower pan. But now that we have the entire floor area closed up, it's now time for more plumbing. That includes some copper piping, the mixing valve, the appropriate tools needed to cut, burr, and solder our copper piping, which of course includes a little bit of fire. Now you can always hire a plumber to do all of this work for you, but if you feel confident enough to try and take on this task yourself, here's a few steps. First, it's all about the proper cutting tools for your copper pipe. Now this is 1/2-inch copper pipe, and we're using a pipe fitting brush to make sure we clean the surface on the interior as well as the exterior of the pipe. Now this is important, especially if you want to make sure you have good adhesion with your solder. I always do this with every copper pipe fitting as well as any brass fittings that we'll have in this case. Once all your fittings are clean, I do apply flux to both the brass as well as the copper fittings. Not only is it easier to make sure that they're snug and slide in appropriately, but it also makes it much easier for your solder to adhere appropriately to both surfaces. Now, I'm not the best solderer, but you do want to apply the heat to the opposite side of where you're applying the solder to. So if you're applying it to the left side as far as the heat goes, you want to apply the solder on the right side, or at least as much as possible. Then, after you have it fully soldered out, you want to make sure that you clean the surface as well, because that flux can corrode your pipe over time. As for our shower mixing valve, this is a Pfister mixing valve. It's a really high quality system, and you want to make sure that you remove the components first before you apply your heat, because if you apply your heat while the shower components are still in it, it could damage them and make your entire system unusable. Once we have the majority of our solder taken care of, I do close out the bottom tub drain of this mixing valve. Because this is actually a mixer for a shower and tub unit, you don't have to use one of these. You can use one that's specifically just for a shower, but in our situation, we had this one, and therefore all you have to do is close it up and you're good to go. Then reinstall your Pfister mixing valve system, and let's remove the old one. Just remember that before you remove the old one to turn off the water, because if you don't, there'll be water spraying everywhere. This one was turned off at the street, but some houses do have connections inside the house. And just as a side note, always make sure you know exactly where your water cutoff switch is before you do any demolition whatsoever. If you're still feeling a little uncomfortable doing the soldering yourself, I'll make sure and leave a link in the description of this video for one of the best soldering tutorials that I've ever seen, and of course, it's on YouTube. After I have the correct positioning, I do secure the mixer in the appropriate location, and in order to solder these locations without burning down the house, I use this non-flammable mat, which basically you can hold a fire to it and it won't burn somehow, some way, which is really nice. Now that I have all of my soldering taken care of and the mixer installed in the correct position, I install a stop valve at the shower head and secure it in place. But now that we have all of our plumbing actually done, we can move on to our hardy board. Now this hardy board is a cement board type product that's moisture resistant, and it's perfect for bathroom applications. It can be applied to walls as well as ceilings as well as floors. And for this project, we are starting with the floor, which is why we're cutting out a small section with a diamond blade for our floor vent right here. Just make sure you're wearing a proper respirator because you really don't want to breathe this stuff in, I assure you. Before install, clean up the surface with a vacuum and apply your subfloor adhesive. Now you want to use a subfloor adhesive in these type of applications because subfloor adhesive provides a great hold, but it never truly hardens and can actually move as the house moves. This is really important, especially for tiled surfaces, because if you use an adhesive that's really stiff, that may lead to breakage down the road and for a tile to pop off unusually if the house settles awkwardly. Hopefully that made sense, but if it didn't, please let me know. These sheets come in 3x5 sections and they're really nice to work with for the most part, but it is hard to cut with just a blade trying to score it and break it. Therefore, a grinder or even a jigsaw makes it extremely easy to cut larger holes for sections like the toilet. This hardy board is readily available at any Home Depot that I've found, and it does come with an appropriate screw that you should be using for this system. I'll make sure and leave a link in the description box below for these products or any of the other products and tools that you see on this channel. I apply plenty of subfloor adhesive in the shower pan area and then lay down the same board as I did previously. Now the one thing to keep in mind, that ABS pipe that you see sticking up right there is not cemented in place, so remember, don't cement that until it comes time for the shower pan. As we finished the floor quickly and easily, we proceeded to the walls, and the one thing that we wanted to add in the shower that didn't have it previously was a little shower niche box. This is a prefabricated niche box by Schluter, and you can build these, which I have shown on the channel previously, but it's a lot easier and way less time consuming just to buy one and install it. The other item that we really wanted to add to this shower was some more light. And with this shower opening, while it's still open, I feed a wire through the top plate of our wall framing down towards the outlet that's right by the sink area, and therefore we'll be able to splice a wire through that to get electrical over to the shower. You do want to make sure you feed the wire through while you still have access to the attic, unless you really want to just crawl around up there later on. As I close up all the other walls in this entire shower area, just keep in mind that with all of these cuts, you can just score this product with a utility knife a couple times, then bring it over to a concrete step or rock, pound it in place, and guess what? It breaks pretty evenly and pretty consistently, with way less dust to have to worry about when you're cutting it with a grinder or a jigsaw. While maneuvering the board around your mixing valve, just make sure you're careful with it and making sure that you're not damaging it in the process of installation, but as long as you're somewhat careful, you should be just fine. As for the shower stub out, the best tool to use is a hole saw that's specifically designed for tile or cement board. This type of hole saw really makes quick work of cement board and provides a perfect hole for small penetrations like a stub out. I wrap all interior walls of the shower with the cement board, but I also apply it to the adjacent walls that I installed new studs to, because I want to make sure that we have proper water protection on those as well. But after we have that taken care of, it should look like this. Feels more like a vampire tomb or solitary confinement at this point, but we'll make sure we change that in the very near future. Now that I have everything fully rocked out, it's time to waterproof this bad boy with the Schluter system. Now this is more of a skin system, but the really nice thing about this system, and the reason why I got it, is because it has a preformed, pre-sloped shower pan that we install with the entire system, as well as a curb that goes along with it. That way we don't have to do any of the mishmashing trying to figure out how to slope our pan appropriately, as well as being able to tile on top of this right after it dries. So let's get it installed. The one thing you're going to need when installing the system is copious amounts of thinset. And in our circumstance, we are using the VersaBond thinset that has a specific A118 code associated with it, which does apply to this system. Now, I did actually call Schluter as well as Custom to make sure that this product can be used with this type of system, and they both said that this is still a very usable thinset when applying the Schluter system. It does suggest to wet down the surface first prior to applying your thinset so the thinset doesn't dry out too quickly. I use a small V-notch trowel when applying, which does have two sides that have the V-notch but flat sides on the other two sides, so I evenly distribute the thinset on the wall first, and then after I have a thin layer applied to the wall in totality, I then use the V-groove on all sides to have a grooved thinset surface for the Schluter paneling to be adhered to. I raise the sheet to the very top of the ceiling, and then I work my way down, trying to provide consistent contact between the Schluter panel and the cement board, with the thinset in between, of course. I found that a 12-inch drywall mud knife was perfect for this type of application because it not only provided a very nice smooth surface to glide against the Schluter, but it also was able to push any of the excess thinset out of the crevices on the side, and that's exactly what you want in this case. As I proceed to the second wall, I do make sure that we have at least 2 inches of overlap between section to section. And as for our little shower cubby, all we have to do is go over it, then cut all 4 sides evenly and wipe off any thinsets on the edges. As for the stub out and shower mixer, I do pre-cut my holes in these locations first and then apply the Schluter system. Made it pretty easy to apply this entire system, but the one key note with this system is that you want to guarantee that you have at least 2 inches of overlap between section to section. Keep that in mind, and that's why you see some excess thinset coming out on the sides there, because that's a 2-inch overlap between each section. That is very important when it comes to having a proper membrane throughout this entire shower unit. After all the walls are wrapped, Schluter does suggest applying these more membrane skirts for the stub out as well as the mixer, which just provide a little extra added protection where moisture might be a little bit more prone to getting into. You certainly don't have to add these, but it does provide a nice professional look and feel as well as extra protection. I will also provide a link in the description box below on a full tutorial from Schluter themselves for this system, because I find it extremely helpful to have as much information as possible before applying a system like this. Now that we have our walls taken care of, we can move forward to our shower pan. This shower pan is really nice because you can cut it exactly to the correct size and shape that you need it, and it's foam, so all you need is a utility knife to cut it. I do take a number of measurements to determine the exact size and location of our drain system. And the drain system is really important because you want to make sure that that pan is directly centered over the drain. In our case, the drain is about 1 inch off on one side, and therefore I make a secondary measurement and make sure that I cut that line, not the other line. And as I noted earlier, all you need is a utility knife. Just make sure that utility knife is brand new. My utility knife wasn't quite long enough to cut it all the way through, so I did have to flip it over and cut it on the back side, but that was easy enough. Then, once we have the pan taken care of, we can proceed to the ledge. I cut that the same exact way with my utility knife for the appropriate size, and as you can see, this foam is strong, and it's not your normal run-of-the-mill foam. This is heavy-duty foam. At this point in time, we're now ready to install our shower pan, and for this application, I do suggest using a larger trowel. In this circumstance, I'm using a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch notch trowel. And then all you have to do is lay the pan in snugly and make sure you step on it quite evenly to make sure you evenly distribute the weight on the pan to the thinset. The shower pan also comes with 90-degree inside and outside corners based upon your application needs. This is a specific and very important step for the Schluter application process. You want to make sure that you apply each one of these corners in each specific section, and then you also apply strips of their waterproofing membrane from corner to corner. As for our ledge, we apply a heavy dose of thinset on the floor as well as against our pan and walls, and then we install our ledge. That assures us that we have plenty of contact between our thinset and our ledge, and after that is positioned correctly, I can proceed to installing the rest of our shower waterproofing protection in our corners as well as the span between corner to corner. After we had all of our corners taken care of throughout our shower pan system, we can install our drain. You apply a heavy dose of thinset to the surrounding drain area and then lay in your drain. You want to see that thinset oozing out of all the sides, as well as the fact that this system is now connecting to our ABS drain pipe below. I pre-cut that as well as applied our all-purpose cement adhesive prior to inserting the drain in place. But once it's in place, you can then apply additional layer of thinset and then a secondary waterproofing skin over the entire drain application. That way we can rest assured that this system has plenty of waterproofing protection. I am now finally able to make my way out of the shower pan and out into the bathroom itself. Now this is nice because I can actually have a little bit more extra room to work with, as well as apply additional layers of protection on the floor. Since the floor isn't getting the Curdy system, all you have to do is apply this backer board seam tape and then apply a thin layer of thinset just to set that seam tape in place properly, which provides added protection for our tile after it's installed. As we wait for all this thinset to dry, you can imagine my disgust at when I look at some of these walls and the ceiling and how there's been years and years of neglect here, which is why we need to do some cleaning. And for some heavy duty cleaning, I'm going to be using this Wagner Power Steamer, which has this perfect little attachment with pad that comes with the kit. All you have to do is unscrew the cap, pour in some water, re-screw on the cap, plug it in, and wait for it to heat up. Once it's heated up, you can start steaming away to your heart's desire. You want to clean these walls for a number of reasons, but the main reason is to make sure you have proper adhesion between your paint and the existing wall surface. And if you have a big layer of grease or dirt that was caused to all the demolition associated with this project, you're never going to get a good quality bond between the paint and the existing wall. That's why we clean these walls prior to paint. And before we get to paint, I want to say a big huge thank you to our sponsor this week, Wagner. They are the sponsor of this week's video, and they not only can provide amazing steamers, but they can obviously also provide amazing paint sprayers, heat guns, surface prep tools, and of course, paint rollers. And not just any paint rollers. This is one truly amazing paint roller because you don't need a paint tray. Wagner calls this product their Paint Stick Easy Roller, and it really is easy. All you have to do is insert this dowel into the paint roller, stick the opposite end of the dowel into the paint, and start sucking the paint into the handle that's built into it. Then secure the handle in place and start pumping the paint into the roller. And this is a gradual aspect because you do have to prime it slightly before it gets a full nice load of paint onto the paint roller. However, I am amazed at the fact that there was 0 drips of paint with this roller, and I mean 0. I was doing every single wall and the ceilings on this entire space, and I couldn't find a single drip anywhere after I was done. And this means that the roller actually loads the paint evenly throughout the roller And this is a big deal to me because this actually means that the device is distributing the paint evenly onto the roller as you're pumping it. And any device that makes life just a little bit easier is always nice in my book. Now this, of course, is just a primer coat because I do want to make sure that these walls are primed prior to painting, but we'll get this first primer coat on, let it dry, and then we'll apply our second coat in the next video. Now, if you're interested in this product or any of the other amazing products that Wagner has to offer, I'll make sure and leave a link in the description box below on where you can find it. After we have all of our walls primed and ready to go, I let the primer dry overnight and come back to it the next day. But now that everything's primed, we're ready for some mud. And for mud, we are using Silver Set 40, which basically means that this product is more of a hot mud base, which means that it dries much faster than your normal generic drywall mud. Now this is actually a really nice advantage in our case because we don't have to worry about waiting hours, if not days, for our mud to fully set and dry and be ready to sand. It'll be dry in 40 minutes. All I'm doing is going around the entire room making sure that any of the walls that were damaged during the demolition portion were taken care of, or if there's any openings that we need to close, we can close them at this point. And guess what? We're going to be closing up our sad little in-wall toilet paper holder because personally I feel this style is just a little outdated and we want to make sure that we really update this bathroom and make it basically unrecognizable compared to what it was originally. I mean, we're already almost there, but we have a few more steps along the way. And that can wait till next week. Because at this point, we are done. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Brent, this can't be one beautiful sexy beast, can it? I mean, look, it's not finished yet. Well, there was a lot of time and energy spent just to get to this point, and that was a lot of hard work. I cannot wait to show you what this project looked like in the very end, but we're not there yet. In my eyes, it's still one beautiful, sexy beast. Oh yeah,